All right, you guys, it's not just me. You see somebody else here with me today, and I cannot tell you, you're getting ready to jump into an adventure, into story. I am here with best-selling author Charles Martin. If you've seen the movie A Mountain Between Us with Kate Winslet and Idris Elba, you will know that he is the author behind that book. Although I have to say, I know self-proclaimed two people that claim they are his greatest fans. I think they're going to have to duke it out someday. And they say, Charles, that just read the book and don't just watch the movie separately, because your book was even just stellar in comparison to even the movie. And I know so many love the movie. He has written many, is it 15 books now?
Yeah, I'm talking to you on my computer, and in this computer is number 15.
Oh, how fantastic. That's so exciting, you guys. And this is the one we're here to talk about today. I hope you can see this. It's called The Water Keeper. But first I have to tell you, Charles, you'll love this story, how we got connected. So my sister-in-law, Barbara, messages me and calls me and messages and calls and emails and calls her brother, and she will not leave us alone, that we have to read this book by Charles Martin called The Water Keeper. She's like, you have to read it. It's as if he knows your story and the story of Pure Hope Foundation. And she would not leave us alone. She kept saying, I think there's something there. You just have to read it. So I promised her, I said, I'm ordering it. I'm gonna get the Audible and the book. And by the way, I do recommend both. I read the book and listened to the Audible, and it was two profound experiences. So, so she's messaging me saying this, and all of a sudden I get this private Facebook message from a friend that says, hi, Kathrine. I just wanted to tell you that you've got to read this book, but more than that, I want to introduce you to the author. He's a good friend of our family's. I just feel like there's something there. As I read the book, I felt like I was watching the Pure Hope Foundation story. So Charles Martin, I just have to tell you that you don't even know the full Pure Hope Foundation story. But I know this story. Again, I'm going to show the book. I'll probably do this several times. But you guys notice, do you see all those little pieces of paper? And I just want you to see. I told him it is dog-eared, written in, and tear-stained.
I love that.
Everybody that knows me knows I'm an avid reader. I love fiction and nonfiction. But I don't know that I've ever gotten into a book that taught me so much while I was completely entertained. And I would cry and I would laugh, but then I would go, wait, what? And the twists and turns were just phenomenal. And the characters I'm in love with. And is it true, Charles, that there's more to this particular series? We're not done?
No, we're not done. When I got towards the end of this one, I had a feeling, I fell in love with my characters, everybody from Murph to Clay to Bones, Summer, Angel, Ellie.
Even as you're saying their names, I feel like I know them. I love that.
Gunner. I mean,
oh, Gunner.
And I felt like Murph was a complex enough character, and he had enough of a backstory that I had not yet told, that I thought maybe I could stretch this into a trilogy. And I've never done that. I've never purposefully written a book thinking I'll turn this one into three. And when I said that to my editor, after reading it, she said, yeah, I think we got enough here. So wow. I'm currently working on number 2, and if I can pull it off, that will launch me into number 3. So we'll see.
So being the one that just read this, and I'm telling you, everybody, don't leave our live right now because you don't want to miss a thing. But as soon as this is over, go get the book and be just like me, where you're waiting for the launch of number 2. Do we know when that is?
No, because it's in this box right here, and I have yet to find my way out of the quagmire that I've kind of written myself into. So.
Well, so does it mean it's up in this box too? It's in between the two boxes?
Some of it. That's interesting though, because my stories, when I first got started, and I know I'm interrupting you, so forgive me, but when I first got started, I met writers who were successful, and they were thriller writers, and they would outline, every scene, and they kind of, they had it all up here, and I was amazed at their process. And I don't write from here. I kind of write more from here and sort of somewhere in between here. And so it's a lot of times I'm not trying to find the next plot point. I'm trying to find the next honest, emotive revelation, if that makes sense.
Oh, completely. Again, after reading your story, you can tell. I've never seen something so masculine and feminine at the same time as well. Does anybody ever? This is my first. I can't wait because I have all these other books to read now because this is the first exposure I've had to you as an author. So I can't wait. Those of you that are watching, how many of you knew Charles Martin before, and how many of you is the first? Because if you're like, my sister-in-law who's read every one of your books, right? But others. So I want to know what's next. So you got to read it, and then we're all going to be waiting with bated breath. Because again, the masculine, feminine, is that true of all of your books?
I think so. I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but I think so. It used to bug me when I first got started. This is the 20th or 21st year of my career, depending upon how you stretch it out. And when I first got started, people labeled me as a romance writer.
Mm.
And I mean.
And you're such a man's man.
I mean, as soon as they say that, I think Fabio, okay?
Right.
That is the initial thing, and like Fabio and a six-pack and baby oil. And I'm like, that is not what I do. But as I've gotten older, because that used to kind of ding me when people would say that, I'm like, can't you just come up with a better name than a romance writer? And as I've gotten kind of in my career, it doesn't really ding me anymore. I'm kind of, I write the stories that I like to read, and I'm okay with that. I love, The Waterkeeper is really probably 3 love stories in one.
It
maybe
is
4, depending upon how you kind of stretch them out. So I'm okay with it. Plus, I mean, we can get into talking about the Lord in a minute, but I mean, the greatest love story ever written is of a king who took off his crown and his ring and took a swan dive out of heaven to rescue a bunch of rebels like you and me. And it's illogical. It doesn't make sense, but he did it.
Greatest romance story ever.
Yeah. So I'm okay. If you want to put me in love stories, that category like that, I'm okay with that. That'd be all right.
Yeah. Well, I will say ding, ding, ding. I think that's right on. You write love stories, but you also write incredible adventure, incredible detail. Like I've never been to the areas that you described, the scenes and the settings, but I felt like I was there. And so there's just so much depth to your writing. So with that being said, the reason why, and I'll finish the story on how we met. So this friend, Angela, who, if any of you saw our Facebook Live on grief, that's how she and I connected. And she got to love on all of you by talking about grief. Well, she messages me. I say, great, I'd love to talk with him. I guess I'm going to get this book that my sister-in-law has been telling me to get. And the more I was in the middle of the book, and you and I were set up to talk on Saturday to set this up. And the chair of the board of Pure Hope Foundation sends me this text. She has no idea this is all happening. Sends me this text and just simply says, Charles Martin is my favorite author. She lists her 3 favorites. I actually wrote them down. She said, I have all these little notes. She said, Long Way Home, Long Way Gone.
Yeah.
And When Crickets Cry.
Yeah.
She mentioned those 2. And then she said, those were my favorites until now. And then she said, The Waterkeeper, you have to, all capitals, get this book ASAP, all capitals. It could be the story of Pure Hope Foundation. And we got the joy of, when we were done talking, she was beeping in, and I got to say to you, how fun is this going to be when I click over and say, hey, Kathy, I just got off the phone with Charles Martin. And she, you know what she said? Don't punk me.
Sure.
She goes, it's not funny, Kathrine. Don't even punk me like that.
That is hilarious.
She's seen the way God has worked in this whole Pure Hope Foundation story. And she knew it was possible, but she couldn't let her heart connect to that. So
really?
That's what you bring to your readers. Those of you that are watching, my sister-in-law said about Charles's book that you can read a lot of books and you can learn a lot, but when you read Charles's books, it changes who you are. When you read Charles Martin books, it changes who you are. So what I want to ask you, that is the burning question for, I know, our audience, you took on this issue of trafficking, and may I honor you by saying, I don't know how you did it to find that balance between making it clear enough that this is dark and it's real, and you pulled in so many ways that it happens into the narrative without making a bullet point or PowerPoint, right? But you didn't take people too far into the darkness, just enough to get mad or sad, enough to do something. But then you brought hope and joy and adventure and purpose and desire to do something. So thank you for that, because that's how we feel at Pure Hope Foundation. We don't need to study the darkness, right? We need to be aware that it's there, but then we just need to bring light and love, and everything changes. Right. So why this topic of, really, I prefer to call it sex slavery, because it is slavery.
It is the slavery of our day.
No question. So why did you decide, will you tell the story of how this subject even came into your life? Guys, this is the highlight. Tune in right now if you're doing 10 things.
All right, let me, they're like all of my books, they usually bubble up out of a soup in me, and that I'm not always cognizant of. And I certainly am not necessarily in control of, but it's just like, I'm a great daydreamer. I've done it my whole life. So stories have funny ways of coming about, but this one, as best I can sort of backtrack it, came from 3 places, and one of which very definitely introduced me to this sex trafficking thing. But let me get at that second. The first part was, I live in Florida, and about 3 miles behind me is the Intercoastal Waterway. And for folks that don't know, the Intercoastal Waterway starts up in Maine. Part of it is man-made, part of it is God-made, but it's a river or a waterway that sort of runs on the inside of some barrier islands on the East Coast. So when there are nasty storms in the Atlantic, ships or boat traffic or travel can move on the inside of the barrier island and have a little bit of protection. So in Florida, we've got literally 360 miles of the intercoastal. For us, it's kind of like our Mississippi. Some would say that's the St. Johns River, and I won't argue with them. But anyway, it's a long river that I have fished on kind of around here, but I've never really, I'd never been on it more than about 5 miles that way. And so about 2 years ago, I thought, man, I'm just going to trailer my boat down there and come back up and just see what I see. Just because that's kind of how I study setting. I did the same thing when I wrote a book called Thunder and Rain, which is set in Texas. And my dad and I made a trip to Texas, and I probably drove by the very place where
it's amazing
Selah is.
Yes.
But I have to go see it and smell it and touch it in order to write about it. So I drove my boat to Key Biscayne, dropped it in the water. We tooled around Stiltsville a little bit, went south to Isla Mirada, went underneath the Card Sound Bridge, which was for me kind of a significant marker, because in another book called Unwritten, I drove a Mercedes off that bridge at 160 miles an hour. So it was a lot of fun for me to kind of drive under it and see, what this thing I had envisioned in my head. And
that is cool.
So it was just a lot of fun. Then we kind of come north, and when you come north, you come through Miami and West Palm, and you go right by Mar-a-Lago, and you go by Jupiter Island, which is where Greg Norman and Tiger all have homes. And you see a part of the world that you would never see otherwise. So it became this thing where I could sort of see it in my mind and think, this would be a pretty cool place. Obviously, when the book starts and you see the scene in St. Augustine,
yes,
between Murph and Summer, that marina exists, the boat that she's in exists, that whole, I saw that sort of in my mind's eyes or coming back north. So,
wow.
Anyway, that's the 300 and something mile trip that sort of became the setting for this, that I thought, gee, I could attach a story. All right. So about 6 months later, which is about 18 months ago, I was on book tour. I had done an event in Greenville, South Carolina. I was driving southwest to Atlanta, kind of in between the two. and I had a signing that night, and I got to my motel. It really was a motel. And my first clue should have been that there was that much bulletproof glass between me and the guy checking me in. That should have been my
The
first clue.
glamorous book tour, right?
Yeah,
Everybody has
everybody
this
thinks the book tour
idea,
is glamour.
right? Here you are with bulletproof glass checking
This
into
was
the
a motel
motel.
where the doors face the parking lot, you know?
Yep.
So, but I'm pretty low. I mean, I'm, you know, like whatever. Okay. So I get my key, I drive my truck around, I park, my room's on the second floor. I go up, throw my stuff in my room, go down to the soda thing and get a water. And as I'm walking back on the second floor balcony walkway thing, I see this very nice car driving the parking lot. That it totally does not fit. It's either a Maserati or a Jaguar. And interestingly, when the guy drove in, he had his left hand on the wheel and I could see his wedding ring. And it like glistened and it caught my attention. Okay. So the guy gets out of the car by himself. He's very nicely dressed. Could have been a wealth manager or something. I mean, he was, you know, okay.
Right.
He was also bigger than me. He was a big guy. He wasn't a muscular person, but he was just a big man. Okay. I'm like 6 feet. He was probably 6'3" or something. And I'm just heading back to my room and I sort of glance and he gets out and I put this together later. He knew where he was going, which meant he'd been to this room before. And I tend to believe, I don't know this, but I tend to believe I don't know that he had a standing like date, but he had been here before. Okay.
Yeah.
And when he saw me, he routed around kind of in front of me, went up some stairs that put him on the balcony that I was on. And then that put me between him and the room that he was going to. So he began walking to his room and I am still walking to mine and we meet, you know, pretty close to my room. And normally when you pass somebody in a hall, you know, you kind of get out of the way and let the person
one side or the other.
He didn't. He just stood in the middle. And he didn't introduce, he didn't say, all he said was, like, I noticed the man is blocking me. And he just launched in. He said, yeah, I've paid for some time with these girls. I don't know if he said girls or women, but with these, let's say women down here. And sometimes they like to have an audience and have somebody watch us or join us. Would you like to? And it took a second for it to kind of register what he was asking me.
Right.
And my first reaction was really anger. And, you know, I thought if I hit him, he's going to go over the railing and he's going to land on his car and I'm going to go to jail. And like, what good is that going to do? And so I just looked at him and all I said was, no. That's all I said. He walked around me, went to the room. I went to my room and I called Christy and it just bugged me. And I began unpacking it. I went to my signing that night and as the Lord would have it, the guy that owned the bookstore where I was signing has a ministry where he rescues girls from trafficking. This motel is one of the places where they know it occurs. So I don't know that he was in with girls in the sex trafficking world, but I tend to think 99% he was.
Yeah.
And so Brian, the guy that owned the bookstore, really began giving me an education. I just began asking a bunch of questions and I don't know, I guess my heart was the thought that in today, and you know this far better than I, so I'm new to this, okay? But the thought that today, in this world, that people are physically owned by another and that they are considered just, you know, like they don't have any more value than that.
Right.
And they're just
a commodity that makes money and then I can throw you out.
Period. There's just something, there's like a Gillette razor.
Yeah.
And so it's our modern day slavery. And Brian educated me and then I spoke with some law enforcement folks who kind of told me a little bit more. And I did speak with one lady who'd been rescued from this from this world. And and then there's the internet. And if you want to do enough research, but you got to be careful. I mean, I literally, when I would start that, I'd pray like, Lord, there are things I just do not want to see.
Exactly.
Can
And
you
you
just
click on the wrong thing, and then you've
seriously?
opened
And
up
a couple of
Pandora's
times at
box.
night, I would literally, I say to Christy, I'm like, honey, this is where I am. I just want you to know it. And she would like, that's kind of like my accountability, my protection. So,
Yeah.
because and then when you get into learning about like girls in Thailand, and it's like the epicenter of just evil.
Yeah.
I mean, as best I could. So that was the thing that pierced my heart. And I really didn't put it in the book to like glamorize it or make a thing out of it, or, to claim to be some expert on it. Here's why I put it in the book. And it really has to do with the third thing. Okay. If anybody on this thing has heard me talk about my book, Long Way Gone is really my take on the prodigal. And it's my attempt to rewrite the story of the prodigal. It's about a boy with a musical gift who grows up under a tent preacher dad in Colorado, and he betrays his dad and takes off and goes to Nashville, where he loses everything. Everything. And when he tries to come home, he can't, and eventually figures out that his dad made a way for him to come home before he ever betrayed him. It was really beautiful the way the Lord put that together. But when I was working on that book, I was in Luke 15. And Luke 15 is when Luke retells Jesus telling the three parables: the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son, or the prodigal. And like, I've read the prodigal, a bunch of times. And it was just like, for some reason on that morning or that day or whatever, the Lord lit up for me the story of the prodigal. And I saw him, and it was like I was walking along with him as he tells his dad, "You're dead to me." And he leaves and, ends up destitute in the pen with the pigs. And, the Lord allowed me to see it with new eyes. Okay. And so that book came out of what the Lord allowed me to see. Same thing is true here. So after my trip up the intercoastal, my experience, at that hotel, I'm in Matthew 18, and Matthew 18 is sort of the counterpart to Luke 15, where Matthew is relaying Jesus telling the parable of the lost sheep, or the shepherd who goes to find him. And for some reason, I just read that parable, with different eyes one day. And it struck me as totally and completely illogical that the shepherd would leave the flock, the 99, to go rescue the one stupid sheep who got himself lost from bad decisions. And he's done it obviously again and gone astray. It was inconceivable. Like, why, what shepherd would do that? Of course, I know it's the story of the gospel, and Jesus does that for us. And no matter what circumstance, no matter what decisions we make, and no matter where that puts us, and no matter how much we cover ourselves up in the filth of our own life, the shepherd always leaves the 99 to find the one, because the needs of the one outweigh those of the 99. And he does it time and time again.
Yeah.
And not only that does he rescue him, but he brings him home, and he throws a party that's greater than the 99 who stayed. And so as I unpacked it, the thing that the Lord allowed me to see, and part of this was because I've spent some time ministering in prisons. I don't have some big prison ministry, but inmates read my books. That's allowed me to go to prison. I love going. And one of the things I've picked up on in prison is that hopelessness is a disease, and most of them don't think that they are worth rescue.
Yeah, that's right.
And in reading this story in Matthew 18, he's telling us that you're worth rescue.
Yeah.
Period. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter how you got there. Doesn't matter how far you've walked away and the tens of thousands of, none of that matters. To the shepherd, we're all worth rescue.
That's right.
And so the soup of those three things and that like emotive response is what bubbled it up. And rightly or wrongly, trafficking became the vehicle that allowed me to show that, because as I've unpacked some of the stories of people who've been rescued, many of them doubted to a very deep level their own value and worth.
Yeah.
Like who would ever love me?
Well, and there's so much in what you just said that I want to comment on and unpack through just reading a line or two without giving away any story. But I just want to read a line or two and illustrate some of the things that you said. First of all, just that moment when you were with the man on the crosswalk, that you said one word, which was no. If we could raise up the heroes' hearts of men, that's one of the pillars of our ministry, that when it came to exploiting women or came to using women or buying women or whatever it is, if that one word could be that strength for each one, I just think that's powerful. So just thank you for that no, because I've been with the young women, right? Whether it's girls or young women, it's the spectrum, as we know, from, young girls all the way to just the ones we failed. They've just been trafficked longer because the average age is 12. So if they're over 18 and they're now a woman, that just means there's that many years we failed them to not help. And so I've been with those girls face to face, tear stained, wishing that somebody would just see their worth and rescue them, be that one person that would say, see them for a human being, for who they are, and say, I'm taking you out of this. That's a dream of a heart, which is the desire of all of our hearts, is to be seen and to be rescued, because we all need it, right? And what's amazing about these young women is it's somebody else's bad decisions that are perpetuated onto them by force, and yet they think they're unworthy and they're undeserved. That's what we spend a lot of time untangling, that lie that they chose it somehow because the psychological warfare is so deep that somehow they chose this. It's wild. So the fact that you wrote in the depth that you did, I just know it was inspired, literally inspired. The other thing I want to say is the concept of the one. You talk about that in the book several times. It's like a marker theme throughout the book that every time I read it, just my heart went, because we will often get the question, how many of you helped? And that we're wanting to expand, right? And build even more hope homes and do even more work and create a global training center. We have our virtual global training center coming up, because you can work with the FBI and Homeland Security and they'll tell you right now, just like your friend, we know where they are. We know but if we rescue them, there's nowhere to put them and no one to care for them. Yeah. And it's interesting because you have a whole vision in your book about a utopia of that.
Another thing that I learned too, and again, you would know this far better than I, but the psychological warfare and the emotional abuse inflicted by the owner on the girls, or whatever you want to call him, is so evil and so deep. They, in many cases, if they're over 18, if a team has come in to rescue them, they'll choose to stay.
Yes, they'll defend, the psychological warfare. Charles, one of the things, you don't know our whole story, but I'll just repeat this for the way of conversation. When I was in my call to this, had the vision, we had put our home on the market, and to just go out and start something we didn't even know about. I had a huge crisis of faith and said, forget it, I'm not doing this. It's too dark, it's too hard. There's a whole story. Everybody that follows us knows this story. But in God's graciousness, I asked him to confirm it. And at the next event where I spoke, there were these young women in the front row. The event was not about trafficking. Nobody knew I was going to do this. But when I was done, they were crying in the front row. I had shared that my desire was to start this vision because I was talking about legacy. And they all said, we're crying because we're all survivors of trafficking. And we got a day pass to hear you speak today, and we need exactly what you're building. And I still get chills. And they said something to me that changed my life forever. They said the worst part was not getting raped for profit 10 and 20 times a day, because that's exactly what happens. The worst part was thinking no one cared. And the reason why they say no when somebody comes to rescue them is because they've been told over and over and over and over, nobody cares about you.
Right.
Nobody cares. You think if your parents knew what you've done now, you think if this person or that person, they'd be embarrassed, ashamed, all of the things that we all on a micro level deal with, right? If people only knew what I thought or how I said or what I did, if they knew the real me, right? All those things that haunt all of us because we've all fallen and we've all gone astray, as you said about the one, it is that multiplied by evil.
Yeah.
And that changed my life. And it's why when that moment was done, I had told my husband that morning, take that house off the market. We're not doing this. When he came in after this talk, he just thought he was picking me up. And I looked at him and I said, till our last day and our last dollar, we are doing this thing. And he was like, what happened while I was gone? So I want to talk about the one, because when people ask about the numbers, I just want to say, we just sit across and look at one girl's face.
Yeah.
And then tell me you need to know 99 or any more. She's worth everything. She's
Right.
worth all of the donations. She's worth all of the time. She's worth all of the pain. And I go, wow, that's how God looks at us too, right? That we're that important. And I want to thank you for bringing out that point. Can I share a couple of lines out of the book, and you can just,
Sure.
it's kind of like, we'll play a game and I'll read something and then you can comment.
Okay.
Because I can't read too much or it's going to give something away. But I just spoke this morning with Nancy Wright, who's the president of Girl Scouts of America. And she was talking about that she often feels like that they're performing CPR for young girl souls. And you wrote on page 201, if Marie had an Achilles heel, as she did, it was acceptance. I couldn't have cared less, but her identity was inexplicably woven into the fabric of the crowd she hung with.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how do you know that? I mean, you're not a teenage girl.
Well, no, but I mean, I'm one of 4 children. I did have 3 sisters. So maybe that
explains a lot.
Maybe that prepared me. Okay. But that thing of needing acceptance is not limited to females. I mean, us guys deal with that. We just deal with it differently. So it's sort of a truth. It's true about us as people. It just plays out differently, and maybe it's expressed differently.
Yeah.
So
it's good. It makes you think. And as a mother, it made me, of course, think about who my daughter, I have 2 grown kids that are out on their own, and I love them and so proud. And then I have my daughter at home who's 15, almost 16, and you just pray every day that they know their identity, that they know their worth, that they know their value. Because again, for those that know the Pure Hope Foundation story, literally what these men prey on is a girl not knowing her value, 100%, how they hook them and then pull them in.
And most of them have pretty deep father wounds.
Oh, big time. In fact, that was one of my, this was one of my favorite things. And again, just for rating's sake, it's the only, if you call it a curse word, I think it's just accurate in the book, but I love this. You said, most of these girls have or had absent fathers, or they were abused by a man they once trusted. So they have this man-sized hole that these sick bastards like to fill with counterfeit.
Yeah, I could have used a lot more. I don't know.
A lot more explicit. Yeah. Ding, 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 ding.
I haven't written very many cuss words, and I've published 1.5 million words now. I think I've maybe written hell or something, and my editor asked me about that one. And I said, man, I'm pretty good with that one.
Yeah.
I think I'm okay.
Yeah. And here we are on our feed, and I'm okay with saying that. Now, do those guys need rescuing too? Yes. But
Sure.
So we all know that, but the truth of the matter is your instinct to punch that guy, right? It says in your anger, do not sin, but it doesn't say don't get angry.
Right.
Yeah. Because this is something worth being angry about. If it
Right.
fuels you like it does Murph to do something, right? That's good anger. That's the kind of anger that we fuel for change. And I love that. Now you didn't punch him, but you're punching that guy with your pen every time you compel one of us by these words you wrote on that paper.
Mm.
I mean, truly, this was the more powerful punch, was writing this book, because you were going to raise up an army of people. And I think men will equally, if not more so, love this book. That was what was interesting. And again, Kathy Crockett, who is the chair of our board for Pure Hope Foundation and a dear friend, and we'll fight Barbara for being your #1 fan. they're going to have to duke that out, my sister-in-law and her. But the funny thing is that she always says, no, my husband, your husband, all the husbands have to read his books. And that's what I mean about the feminine and masculine, which again is so what Pure Hope Foundation is about. We're about raising up the heroes' hearts of men and the power of positive peer pressure of men united together in good battle, locking shields. Like there's nothing better, right, in the world than that. And you've done that with this, and you're going to have a lot of other men, I think, join you as this moves forward.
Well, thank you. I do pray that that's the case.
It's good. Now I'm just going to tell all of you, jot this down, because when you get to this book on pages, I can't read any of it because I don't want to give anything away, but from pages 213 to 216 is where it's the most dog-eared, tear-stained, because of the hope and truth and vision that you had that I'm literally living right now. And so again, I don't know how in the world that you did this, but it is like a meld of our graduates and some of our current young women's stories in those 3 pages. I could have written that in the truth of it being real. It's just phenomenal. So you guys mark that down when you get there. I want you to all come back to this feed and comment and give me your thoughts once you get there. Okay, I think I have one more I just want you to comment on. This is my favorite whole section of the book. I have no idea if it's in your book is in front of you, but people should actually hear it read by you. On page 183. Oh, good. Any good author has their book right nearby. I love it.
Actually, no, I was sitting down here and I hadn't even thought about it. And Christy said, you should take a book with you.
Oh, see? Good wife. By the way, I've got to make sure I close with asking you a question about one of our pillars is strengthening families. So I got to ask you about your marriage, because that's a really cool story too. So on 183, if you will read, it starts around like the rest of the human race through the word period. Top of 183.
Top of 183.
She waited her whole life, a tortured creature.
Yeah. What do you want me to start with?
Just right there.
Okay, and you want to come down to what? To
that last, the second period. It just says, the word period. In the third paragraph.
Oh, I see. Okay. I might read one paragraph more than that, but here we go.
Oh, please read as much as you want. I would love it.
She'd waited her whole life, a tortured creature who, despite her crusty exterior and like the rest of the human race, had been and was continually asking 2 questions. Who am I? And more importantly, whose am I? In my life, in my strange line of work, I discovered that we as people can't answer the first until someone else answers the second. It's a function of design. Belonging comes before identity. Ownership births purpose. Someone speaks who we are, and out of that, we become who we are. It's just the way the heart works. In Eden, we walked in the cool of the evening with a father who, by the very nature of the conversations and time spent together, answered our heart's cry. It was the product of relationship. But out here, somewhere east or west of the garden, beyond the shadow of the fiery walls, we have trouble hearing what he's saying. And even when we do, we have trouble believing him. So we wrestle and search. But regardless of where we search and how we try to answer the question, or what we ingest, inject, or swallow to numb the nagging, only the Father gets to tell us who we are, period. This is why fatherless boys gravitate toward gangs. No, it's not the only reason, but it plays a big part. In the absence of a dad, can the mom answer it? Sure, happens all the time. I've met many a mom who has more gumption and guts than the weasel of a man she married. Truth is, 99% of broken homes are caused by dads leaving, not moms. The problem seldom lies at the feet of the mom. They're stuck cleaning up the mess, although there are exceptions. And maybe those exceptions are the most painful of all, but whatever the cause and however it is answered, and regardless of who answers it, we as broken children forever ask, whose am I? This is the cry of the human heart.
It's funny. You read right to where my last, see what I mean? Dog-eared, tear-stained, and all written up. Phenomenal. It is the cry of the heart. Well, I know I have just taken so much of your time. My prayer is always that the people that are watching, you guys comment, again, what is your favorite Charles Martin book? My heart is that we invested this time, that you'll get great return on lots of readers. What's amazing about our followers is not only do they participate, they engage, they share, they spread the word. They are like ambassadors for good things in the world. It's just really cool because we want to move the light right everywhere we can and move out the darkness. And your book does that. Like I said, we are all about raising up the heroes' hearts of men and people stepping up, and you have done that with your pen in a way that could go global. And literally, as I was reading it, I'm like, I feel like I'm watching a movie in my head as I'm reading it. So it's phenomenal. I'm thrilled there's a trilogy. I cannot wait for the next book. You can tell it is written from your heart. And I just want to close with, Charles Martin, the man, who is also married to an incredible woman, Christy, you've been together almost 31 years from what I understand, and married 26. So for our Strengthening Families arm, what is the secret to that longevity of marriage and relationship?
Well,
I put you on the spot.
No, it's not a spot. I don't mind at all. I love the question. I want to try and make it palatable and short enough. I have this way that I look at us as people, which is, and we started this, with me talking about a king who took off his crown and came on a rescue mission with us. But when we come to the king, we're wanting access to a kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, and he is the king. And in order for us to become the children of God that John says he has given us the right to become, when we step to the threshold and do as Romans says, we believe and we confess that you are Christ the King and Lord, we give up all our rights. Like we surrender willingly and completely and wholeheartedly to the dominion of the King and the kingdom, Jesus. And if Christy and I have done something right, we both come before the King willfully submitted, and his will be done and his kingdom come. And that doesn't mean I'm always, if she's sitting right over there, so she can chime in, but
she can pop right into that screen.
You'll be quick to tell you I'm not always this loving, perfect husband, and I can be selfish and all of that sort of stuff. But like there have been times when we've had really heated discussions where we both believe that we're right. And the only thing I know to do, because I can't fix her and I can't fix me, the only thing I know to do is just grab her hand and say, honey, we just got to pray. The Holy Spirit, we got to give the Holy Spirit room to work here because I'm mad and you're mad and I don't like you and you don't like me. And so if we've done something over 26 years that has brought us closer together and brought us closer to the Father, we pray a lot, a lot. And I would like to think that when Jesus stares through the floor of heaven at us, he sees two hearts really submitted to him, and that, like, completely, like, without reservation. So because if that is not the case, if you're holding on to something, then you're still a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're still a self-made man worshiping your own creator. And rebellion is what got us in the trouble in the first place. So I know that's kind of making it a bigger question and a bigger discussion, but I think if Christy and I have done something well, it's been that we've walked with the Lord. I mean, the scripture says we love him because he first loved us. And so, and Paul also says to the Philippians, he says that he has poured out his love into your hearts. And that word for pour is the same word used to describe what he did with his blood on the cross, which was a total emptying.
Wow.
So he's given that to us. And, you know, I think we've shared that and expressed that with one another. That doesn't make us the perfect couple. And, you know, if you've been married long enough, you know all that. But I love her, and most of the time she loves me. And I think we walk with the Lord.
Yeah.
You know, what is it? Who is it? Peterson that said a long obedience in the same direction.
Yes. Yes.
That is I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. It is just not a sprint. It's just a long obedience in the same direction. You fall down, you get up, you dust yourself off, and Lord, it's me again. I'm sorry, I'm back. And, you know, just all of that. So
I love that. And someday we're going to have Christy on too, because I know when your next book comes out, we may have to do this again, and just to hear her heart. I want to bring up one other thing that I wonder if it has an impact on your marriage, but I know it has an impact on you as a man. I was on a Facebook Live that you did about your book just the other night, and you mentioned a group of men, because we have a group where men gather together. It's called Cave Time, and it's based on the mighty men of David, right, in the cave together. And then they walked out the mighty men, right? They walked in debt and depressed and all that, and they walked out mighty man. What happened in the cave, right?
wow.
So, but that
I love
group
that.
of men gathering, right? And you mentioned that the other day, and so tell me the impact of having a group of men, because that is something I hear a lot in the, again, strengthening families. We do marriage retreats, we do men and women leadership retreats, all of those things. So the impact of a group of men, a lot of men are isolated, right? They're leaders, they're getting it done. They're getting it done to provide and to be there. But how does that group of men impact you, both as a man and as in your marriage?
My group of mighty men will be at my house in about 45 minutes.
Love it.
Because that's what we do once a week. So about 13 years ago, I was actually driving to Texas working on what became Thunder and Rain. And Christy and I were in my truck, and we had, 2 days of driving, and we got the audio or audible book for Love and War, which is a John and Stacey Eldridge book.
Yes.
And we listened to it, and we, in between, like at the end of every chapter, we would stop and pray and talk through these things. And it was a neat, sweet time. But when we got to the end of it, we end up near Dallas, and I look at Christy and I'm like, we got to do this with our friends. So we just called about 8 or 10 couples, 11, well, no, yeah, about 7 couples. And we did Love and War as a book kind of together as couple. It was hilarious and, a lot of fun stuff. But when it's over, like, I'm really knit together with these guys by now, and they're knit with me. And so I just said, hey, could we keep meeting? And it became this, and it has become this beautiful brotherhood. I have no intention of quitting. I mean, they know the skeletons in my closet. They know the stuff I'm not about to tell you. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And I think the thing that the Lord does, and I'm not the expert, but I have some experience, which probably qualifies me for an opinion. Okay. And my opinion is this. I think the biggest hurdle we as men have in our lives in terms of authenticity is shame. I mean, I think it's why Jesus met Peter on the beach at Tabgha to begin with. and built a charcoal fire and said, "Hey, Peter, do you love me?" Because he's dealing with the shame of him reject. I mean, the first thing Jesus deals with in Peter post-resurrection, him personally, is shame. I think that's significant.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lord has allowed us as a group of men to press through all of the shame and the addictions and the, all the stuff. Okay.
Yes.
And we've seen, I feel like Peter and John, how can we but speak of what we've seen and heard? We've seen the miraculous. We've seen wild deliverance. We've seen healings. We've seen a brain tumor there in x-rays or CT scans, and then no brain tumor. We've seen epilepsy healed. And so it's a beautiful thing that I cherish and I love. And these are men that are really close to my heart. If you know anything about my nonfiction, I wrote a book called What If It's True, which is really just,
I can't even get through. That's the other one I've been listening to. And you do
really,
the audible for it, and it's phenomenal.
well, it's my
Chapter
walk.
2, guys, chapter 2 of that. Yeah, I can't even get over it. Go ahead.
It's really my walk with Jesus. And when I finished it, my publisher said to me, "Do you have any more nonfiction in you?" And I said, "Well, I really have outlined part 2. Will you let me write it?" And she did. And so that's become a book entitled "They Turned the World Upside Down." And it comes out January of next year. But it's about a bunch of believers, men and women both, who saw Jesus dead, buried, lifeless, and then saw him roll back the stone and walk out shining like the sun. And they walked out the life he gave them, the authority that he gave them. And the thing he first tackled with them was their unbelief, which became belief, which then he chiseled into faith, which became faithfulness. And those people turned the world upside down. And that's why you and I are sitting here talking about Jesus.
Right.
So these guys, to me, and when you see that book, all of the blurbs, when you sell a book, the pressure from the publisher is get famous people to blurb it, because that means other people will pick it up. And I just finally said in this one, I said, look, I'm going to get my brothers to blurb this.
Yeah.
So when you open up that
it.
book, the blurbs are the guys that I walk and do life with, and they're just normal Joes like me. And it's tender to me.
But isn't that the best endorsement? Can I say those that are in your inner circle? Let's be honest,
I think
right?
so. I think so, because it's
Absolutely.
true. I mean, they're telling the truth because they know you well enough. Like, you can't blow snow up their skirts. They know me.
Right. Exactly.
So I love them. It's I don't know how. I cannot tell you the number of times I've been on book tour. And book tour is not fun. I mean, sometimes it's fun, and I love meeting the folks, but it's also dangerous because I have an enemy who prowls around like a roaring lion and he wants to take me out. And I've had women knock on my door. I don't know,
right.
And so I love being able to pick up the phone and call and say, "Hey, will you pray with me?"
So cool.
And I don't know how men make it in life without a group of men.
Yeah.
Like,
that are for you, they're for your marriage,
how do
they're
you do
for
that?
the right things. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I hope they will band together, and you'll have to tell them hi when they get there from me. So I just want to say, I'm sitting here just looking at this book I can't wait for people to meet, if they haven't read this yet, Murph and Summer and Angel and Clay and Ellie and Gunner. Oh my gosh, you about killed me with some of the Gunner stories. Okay. And everybody, this is the book. If you have not read it, start here with me. Be on the same pathway with me, The Waterkeeper. I loved the Audible, and I loved reading the hard copy. And What If It's True is what I'm listening to now, but I'm a really fast reader and listener. So I want you to tell me what you would say, Kathrine, after you're done, after everybody's done with The Waterkeeper and What If It's True. For me, which book should I read next?
Ooh. Well, given that you're in Texas, you might
Thunder and Rain, baby, huh?
because it's about a Texas Ranger.
Okay.
And the story will resonate with you. Texas is dear to my heart. My dad's family is from there. There are a lot of Martins who were. My dad played football at Arlington. My
Oh,
grandfather was a barber in Fort Worth and in Stephenville. Mineral Wells is kind of like the epicenter of my family, or where they were
wow.
from. So Texas is dear to my heart, but I mean, asking me what book I like the best is like lining up our three boys and
And
saying,
saying, I was just going to use that analogy. I know this is like asking you which child is your favorite.
okay,
Yeah. I'm going to read them all. I can tell already because of how compelling and amazing. And if you give a shout out to Barbara and Kathy,
hey, Barbara and Kathy, thank
there you
you.
go.
I
You
know
just made their day.
you're both my biggest fan. I know that.
That's right. I love it. And I'm joining them, but I have a lot more books to catch up to be able to even claim that name. So once I've read them all, I'll be in that. So anyway, you guys go get this. It's incredible. Please thank Christy for allowing us this amazing time with you, and enjoy your time with your mighty men friends. And thank you again for the work you're doing. You're fighting this battle with your pen. And I think it's going to be even more than that. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm really grateful to you and I appreciate you. Thank you.